Ladies and gentlegrams, once upon a time it feels as ancient as Babylon. Behemoth battled brashly, blessing us with the story of Adin. Pusha pierced the perfect perception of Labriana the leprechaun. Labri lost a rap battle and admitted he had a son. And ever since then, the pompous prom queen petition Padre put a petty plan on to petrify Pusha T. He tried his best to blackball his battle opponent from the industry for eternity. Silencing Verse's attempted lyrical hearses, the worst is, Pusha T had to leave the label which dispersed his music. So in this video, we will peel the layers back on every calculated Karen attack from the Canadian Katy Perry against rap's kingpin of crack. Let's see how far Fraudbury attempted to go to blackball Pusha T. Welcome to behind the scenes of the OVHO Rodeo. Now before we start, please bless my heart by hitting that like and subscribe button like a nose to a fart. Now ladies and gentlegrams, don't you love to think about the fact that if Birdman paid Pharrell over 20 years ago, we would not have all this Karen complaining and kvetching from the OVHO? Yes, if you didn't know, this beef between Pusha T and YMCMB really dates back 2 decades at this point. And it's funny how all of these things are so interconnected. So in around 2001, 2002, the Clips, Pusha T and his brother No Malice released a song with Birdman produced by Pharrell called What Happened to That Boy. The song was a success. Birdman, of course, never paid Pharrell, Pusha T, or his brother, and Pharrell had vowed to never work with another Cash Money artist again. Around this same exact time, a young Labriana, pursuing his acting career and getting tuna sandwiches made by his mother in his suburban household, became the biggest fan of the Clips and Pharrell, citing them as some of his biggest inspirations early on, even going as far as buying a microphone of Pusha T's off of eBay. And now fast forward about 22 years later, Labri's no longer crying about tuna sandwiches.
Where's my sandwich? I'm so hungry.
I didn't buy you that sandwich.
Why?
Because I bought chicken salad. I'll make you a sandwich. I bought some other things.
Why couldn't you just got me that sandwich?
Because the lineup was incredible.
But things are still fishy. He's been crying behind the scenes to his rich baby daddy, Lucien Grange, the CEO of UMG, to protect him against the wrath of Pusha T. The irony of it all? That's his all-time favorite artist. Now, Pusha T, he's been getting busy, so him and his brother, Malice, No Malice, I don't know what he goes by now, but they are most definitely one of the greatest hip-hop duos of all time, and they're returning after 15 years to drop a brand new album. They released a brand new single. The whole thing is produced by Pharrell. I like the single a lot, but I'll be honest, Pusha T starts his verse off rapping, "Yellow diamonds look like pee-pee," and that throws me off for the whole track. But in promotion of the album, they recently did a sit-down interview with GQ magazine. And you guys have probably seen, they've been talking some crazy stuff about what's been going down behind the scenes. So their project together has been ready to release since summer 2024. You guys remember what else was going down in the summer of 2024? Well, very similarly to the summer of 2018, Labri was getting destroyed, but this time it wasn't from Pusha T, it was from Kendrick Lamar. And Kendrick Lamar at the same time had a verse on this new Clips album where allegedly he's reflecting on the beef, on everything that just went down throughout that summer. Now, UMG, who, as you guys know, is roped into a defamation lawsuit by Labri over their release and promotion of Not Like Us. And in that lawsuit, Labri's team had stated that Drake had been warning UMG for many months before filing the lawsuit that they better take that song down, they better stop this insane rollout that they had going on of Not Like Us, or else there'd be some ramifications. So around that same time, the Clips, who were signed to Def Jam, I can never pronounce it, Def Jam. They were signed to Def Jam. Def Jam is the sister company of UMG. UMG owns Def Jam, right? So the executives over at Def Jam hear this new record with Kendrick Lamar where he's talking about the whole battle. We're going to break that down. But the executives heard this, and apparently Kendrick wasn't even really dissing Drake on this song, but just the whole optics of Pusha T and Kendrick being on this song and them kind of alluding to the beef, that was enough to scare UMG into saying, nah, we're not following through. We're not releasing this song. This is a bad look, especially because Drake, our little prom queen petition padre, is threatening legal action against us. You have to censor this Kendrick Lamar verse. Of course, Pusha T said, nah, we're following through. So he bought himself out of his contract with UMG. He paid over $1 million to leave the label and sign an independent distribution deal with Jay-Z's Rock Nation. So Pusha T opens up about this in his new interview with GQ magazine. We're going to break down that whole interview, but what's crazy is this is a long history of Drake attempting to silence and blackball Pusha T from the industry ever since Pusha T delivered the news to Drake and to the world that Drake was hiding a son. Now, what's funny is before Drake did sue UMG, Kanye West, who at one point had signed Pusha T also speaks on Kanye, we'll touch on that as well later in this video, but Kanye had made reference to the fact that the CEO of UMG, Lucien Grange, was Drake's rich baby daddy, aka Drake was like a spoiled little brat. Anything he wanted from UMG, they pulled the strings to do. If you guys don't remember, the story of Adin was removed from YouTube over copyright claims from UMG. It was never released on streaming platforms, and there's a long history ever since the story of Adin was released where Drake has tried to silence Pusha T because he was not a fan of the backlash from that record. Now, this is a rabbit hole, all right? This is a long 7-year history of Lobry pulling some Karen moves. Way before this lawsuit with Kendrick, he was doing some even shadier stuff with Pusha T behind the scenes here. So let's break down the full history. Don't forget again to like and subscribe. Stay connected and bless the Rapaholics tribe, and let's get on with this. So long before Pusha T was exposing Drake for his shady industry tactics in magazine interviews, it was actually Drake's mentor Lil Wayne who was beefing Pusha T, No Malice, The Clips, and Pharrell. And the irony of it all is they were taking shots back and forth at each other in magazine interviews almost 20 years ago. So in December of 2006, Lil Wayne did an interview with Complex magazine where they asked him about The Clips, Pusha T, and basically what he thought about them releasing a song called Mr. Me Too, where they're criticizing other rappers wearing Bape clothing when of course it was Pharrell, Pusha T, The Clips who had brought that brand into hip-hop fashion culture. Lil Wayne was kind of copying them with, the purple camo hoodies and everything. So Lil Wayne's asked about this in December of 2006, and he says, I don't see no effing Clips. Come on, man, Weezy, man. They had to do a song with us to get hot, B. What happened to that boy? Remember that song? Come on, B, don't do that, dog. This is an effing legend you're talking to right here. Who the F is Pharrell? Do you really respect him? That guy wore Bapes, and y'all thought he was weird. I wore it, and y'all thought it was hot. I don't rap about no Coca-Cola like The Clips. They're not talking about me. I've been rich since I was 14 years old off of selling records. I don't rap about no damn Coca-Cola. And of course, The Clips would respond to this in their own magazine interview with Laced magazine in 2007. Malice said, if you're talking about wobbledy, drop it like it's hot, you can't be a legend. And Pusha T said, you can't kiss other men, you can't wobbledy, and you can't bite styles. You can't bite everybody's style. You can't try to rap like Jay-Z, dress like The Clips, become a Coca-Cola dealer after 5 albums, and now dress like Jim Jones. You can't do that. Now, I have a full video breaking down Lil Wayne's beef with Pusha T, but to give you the short summary and how it ties into Drake, they kind of kept going back and forth, and it escalated when Pusha T dropped his 2012 diss track against the entirety of the Young Money Cash Money imprint, Exodus 23:1. That's where we got the iconic bar, you're signed to one guy who's signed to another guy who's signed to 3 guys, essentially criticizing Lil Wayne and Drake for being tied to horrible record contracts, being signed to Young Money, being signed to Cash Money, being signed to Universal, too many hands in the pot. And the ultimate message of that song was that these guys are not dying for you. When it comes down to it, Birdman and them don't have your best interest at heart. Obviously, Pharrell learned that the hard way 10 years before the Exodus song with What Happened to That Boy, right? Because what happened to the paycheck from that song? Lil Wayne claps back with his own brutal diss track, Foolish, where he says, F Pusha T and anybody that love him is head up his butt, I'ma have to headbutt him. Pusha T does not respond, but instead redirects the target onto Drake. And the little behind the scenes backstory there is, this is around, January, February, March of 2018. Kanye is cooking up his next album in Wyoming, where he invites Drake at one period of time to record with him. And of course, Pusha T, being part of the good music camp, is there on multiple other occasions, not with Drake in the room, and this is going to play an important role in the story shortly, but he's also there working with Kanye. Now, according to Drake in that famous interview where he says, I study rap battles for a living.
I study rap battles for a living.
In that interview, he also spills the Pusha T about how he thought he was going to Wyoming for Kanye to give him some beats and do some work for Drake's new project. He tells Kanye he has an album, aka Scorpion, coming out June of 2018. And he also tells Kanye about his new kid that the world doesn't know about at this point. He plays him this record called March 17th or March 14th, where he's talking about discovering that he just had a child. And when he leaves Wyoming, he feels the energy's off. And then Kanye announces that he's about to put out 5 albums in that same month of June. The one that Drake said he was about to put out his Scorpion album in. And that's when, of course, we get the Daytona album by Kanye West and Pusha T, where we get some more bars aimed at Drake on the song Infrared. Pusha T raps, "It was written like Nas, but it came from Quentin. How could you ever right your wrongs when you don't even write your songs?" Essentially just calling Drake out for the ghostwriting rumors, right? Of course, Drake responds that same day with his own full-fledged diss track, Duppy Freestyle, aimed at both Pusha T and Kanye West, and on that track, he finishes it off rapping, "I told Weezy and Stunna I'ma done 'em for you," aka I told Lil Wayne and Birdman that this is decades in the making, and I'm about to put this beef to rest once and for all. Little did he know it would really be Pusha T just a couple days later that put the beef to rest. That's when we get the story of Adin, and you guys know how that song goes. But I did think this little clip was interesting, where Pusha T really dissects the angle that he was coming from on that song and breaks down Drake's character, why he is the way he is, why he handles the relationships he has the way he does, why he's never satisfied. Pusha T really laid the groundwork here for a lot of the sentiments that Kendrick would later echo on all of his diss tracks.
Like, what's your family like? Oh, your dad left you at 5. Oh, I get that. He never walked you to the bus stop. You're mad about this. Your mom, she never remarried. You don't even know what like family is, so of course you don't dig marriage. You gotta think about who a person really, really is, and it's like, okay, bang, you don't know where you stand at. Oh, that's why you highlight your dad clowning. You run to the Memphis. Oh, I'm Memphis, Houston. That's my black side.
So, of course, after the story of Adin, Drake had claimed to have been cooking up this massive evil diss track that would have tore the roof off of Kanye West and Pusha T. Many speculate that because when Kanye went on TMZ and said slavery was a choice, there was actually a deleted clip from that same TMZ interview where Kanye was talking about the Mustache Man. And again, this was years before he actually publicly came out to endorse the Mustache Man. He had TMZ delete that footage because obviously that'd be a terrible look. And there were rumors circulating that this was what Drake would have mentioned within this ruthless red button of a diss track against Pusha T and Kanye that he never released, right? That Kanye was infatuated by a man who, at the very least had a very ugly mustache. And of course, an ugly history in Germany during World War II as well. He never releases that diss track. J Prince comes out to claim that this beef is done. But of course, Drake releases his Scorpion album. It's full of disses against Pusha T and Kanye. You get a track on there called 8 out of 10, where Drake raps that, "As luck would have it, I've settled into my role as the good guy. It was never a question of whether I could or should I. I'm the good guy now, luck is on your side." But this would actually be the beginning of Bobry pulling some of the most wicked Karen actions behind the scenes within the music industry, specifically to target Pusha T for the story of Adin. So first, as I mentioned before, of course the song was only released on YouTube on World Star Hip Hop, but it was taken down and there was a message that said, "This video contains content from UMG who has blocked it on copyright grounds." So already, UMG is interfering. Again, this song is not on streaming platforms. They're removing it off of a third-party channel on YouTube. And this is UMG who removed it. It said it very clearly in the copyright strike. The irony of it all is that it was a Jay-Z beat. And so it was UMG who copyright strike it on behalf of Roc Nation and Jay-Z. Again, Pusha T just signed to Roc Nation to release his brand new Clips album with that Kendrick Lamar verse that UMG refused to release. After that, Pusha T goes on to do an interview on the Joe Budden podcast in the prime days of the Joe Budden podcast nonetheless. And he goes on to explain that even though Drake was telling Kanye about his child during the Wyoming sessions, that wasn't actually where Pusha T had heard the news about Drake's kid. It was actually because Drake's right-hand producer, 40, was pillow talking with a woman that Pusha T knew, and that's where he got the information from. Now, in that same podcast, Pusha T reveals a little bit of interesting information, which kind of foreshadows the negative sentiments Pusha T currently has against Kanye, which we'll touch on when we review his full interview with GQ. But even back then in this 2018 podcast with Joe Budden, Pusha T was emphasizing that he doesn't really understand and he's not a part of the weird back and forth that Kanye and Drake have, where they'll diss each other, but then they'll get on a song and be best friends and Kanye will show love to Drake, etc. That weird back and forth. And as a matter of fact, when Drake is in Wyoming, this is before the story of Adin was even released, Pusha T is not allowed to be there at the same time as Drake. So Drake was already blackballing Pusha T from certain studio sessions with Kanye West and essentially making sure to avoid him any chance he could. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg of the Karen behavior that Drake would later go on to display. So let's get into all of that. But first, ladies and gentlegrams, unlike Drake, a bunch of you guys have been telling me you've been Anita Max winning some free cash from playing mobile games. So I want to put all you guys on to something that almost seems too good to be true. All right, let me give you a little glimpse into my life. When I'm not making this content for you guys, I have a disgusting addiction to my phone. My daily screen time is higher than Drake on that album cover, higher than Snoop off the edibles. So if you guys suffer that same addiction as me, I want to put you onto something that's going to change your life. FreeCash.com is a program that partners with mobile games that are looking for more users to play their games, and they will literally pay you to play their games for free. All you got to do is sign up using the QR code you see on the screen or using the link in the description of this video. You make an account super easy. All you got to do is put in your email, create a password, verify your email, and then you're good to go. And they got a bunch of games. My favorite is the Monopoly Go because we're always on the go trying to make some money. Once you make an account, you just click the game you want to play, follow the directions that they give you. The directions are super easy. Usually you just got to download the game and start playing. So it's about time you put that phone addiction to good use. Again, use the QR code you see on the screen or the link in my description. Create an account and you could start making more than $150 just to play a game on your phone. So as far as the public saw, things would simmer down between Pusha T and Drake later in summer of 2018, right? It seemed like Drake had redirected his focus onto Kanye, sneak dissing him on various records like No Stylist with French Montana, where he rapped, "Keep it a G, I told her don't wear no 360s around me," referencing Kanye West's Yeezy shoe. On Sicko Mode with Travis Scott, of course, Drake rapped, "Crept down the block, made a right, cut the lights, paid a price. They think it's sweet, it's on site," referencing the fact that they were neighbors in Calabasas. Of course, there were tons of shots aimed at Kanye West on Drake's Scorpion album, a lot more than there were at Pusha T. It seemed like Drake had really moved on from that battle with Push. But really, that was just what he wanted you to believe. So, a couple months later, in November of 2018, Pusha T is performing at Tyler, the Creator's Camp Flog Gnaw Festival, and as he's performing, a big sign appeared him on screen on that stage saying, "F Drake." Now, this wasn't actually Pusha T who planned for that sign to be there. He tweeted out after the concert saying, "Corny tech dude effing with my screens at the Camp Flog Gnaw Festival. I speak for myself and all of you know how I make my statements. Dissing anybody on screen is not part of my show. Otherwise, great festival. Thanks, Tyler, for having me out." And while that concert ended successfully, Pusha's concert the next week after that would not end the same way. See, Pusha T was headlining a Toronto show on November 20th, 2018 for the Danforth Music Hall Festival. And as you can imagine, performing in Toronto just about 6 months after this beef transpired would not end too well. It's a good thing that Kendrick is doing stadiums in Toronto, so it's much less likely that a situation like this could occur there. But anyways, Pusha T is performing, and initially a group of individuals start throwing water, beer, and paint on stage in the middle of Pusha's performance. Then Pusha T security had to take down 3 guys who rushed onto the stage and tried to attack Pusha T. One of Pusha T's friends, Upscale Vandal, had tweeted about the event saying, "I'll give you what I saw. Pusha T was singing a song, and right on the bar where he says something about getting wet/soaked or something along those lines, about 10 mans threw water at him and ruined it for everyone." Simultaneously, about 3 guys rushed on the stage and tried to jump Pusha T. Pusha's boys quickly stopped and beat those guys down, and then as the guys who were trying to rush Pusha T ran away, they got beat by the crowd as well. About 10 minutes later, the cops came and stopped the entire show. As this was going down, Pusha's on stage and he says to the crowd, "This guy paid some guys to throw beer. The F is that? Do you guys know where I'm from?" Basically implying that Drake had paid people to attend this Toronto show and cause chaos. Complex had even claimed at the time that there were rumors Drake bought 200 tickets to that Pusha concert in order to quote-unquote cause a scene. And after this 2018 performance by Pusha T in Toronto, we never saw him enter Canada for a concert again. And this sucks for me because I'm in Canada. I've never got the chance to see Pusha T. And Pusha claimed himself 3 years later in a Drink Champs interview in 2022 that he was actually banned from Canada.
I'm banned from Canada. Like I can't get back over there, right?
Really?
Yeah, I ain't allowed to go back over there.
They think that you went too far.
I don't care.
I
don't care. Oh. There is no too far. I don't play like that. So that's why you don't play with me.
Right.
That's why you don't play with me.
Right.
There is no too far.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
Forever.
Is there any
Leave
time?
Leave it alone. Leave me be. Leave me be because there's no too far.
So essentially what you have here is Pusha T claiming that he's banned from studio sessions when Drake is in them. And now, after this beef, he's banned from Canada as well. Banned from doing concerts there. All over a beef that Drake willingly participated in. Does this sound familiar to you? If it does, you're probably thinking of this lawsuit that Drake filed over a rap beef that he willingly participated in as well.
I study rap battles for a living.
But of course, being the petty Instagram fingers that Lawbury is, he had to address Pusha T's claims of him being banned in Canada in an Instagram post where his right-hand man Chubb said, "We don't ban guys, we welcome them with open arms." Drake commented on this post saying, "Come on over." And between the crying emojis and demon emojis, these sound more like threats than welcoming open invitations to Canada, right? And in that same Drink Champs interview, Pusha T is asked, it's been 5 years since this beef with Drake. Are you willing to patch things up? And if not, why not? And Pusha T answers, "I'm at peace. I want nothing. I don't want to patch things up because of things that I don't speak on and things I won't speak on that have happened since. For me, it's not even about, if this was just a rap thing and it was what it was, then that'd be cool." And then he goes on to obviously explain that he's now banned from Canada. And now we fast forward to 2025 when Pusha T sits down for a brand new interview with GQ where he fills in the dots, connects the puzzle pieces, whatever the expression is, on a lot of shady activity that has been going on behind closed doors within the industry that all stems to this 2018 beef with Drake. So as we go through this interview and dissect it, we're also going to look at some key examples that Pusha T brings up where we see Drake continuously blackball him. Remember, at this point again, from Pusha T's point of view, we already have the fact that UMG copyright striked his diss against Drake, The Story of Adin. Pusha T tells Joe Budden that when Drake is in the studio, Pusha T is not allowed in there. And he's now allegedly, according to him, also banned not just from the booth, but also from Canada. So let's start off with this interview. So it kicks off with the interviewer saying that it feels like we probably should have gotten this Clips album about a year ago at this point. But this summer, Malice and Pusha swear it's finally go time. Once you've delivered and once you've done your part, you get to see how things fall in place, Malice says sagely. And a lot of the times, they fall into place better than you could have planned. And they also talk about their disdain towards the current state of hip-hop. Mainly Malice specifically. The interviewer asks, if every new thing you create doesn't reinforce your place in the conversation amongst the best to ever do it, then why bother? And Malice says, I feel like I had seen the engine give out on rap. Besides my brother and a couple others, I feel like it's in the same place it was where I left. Keep in mind, Malice had retired from hip-hop in around 2009. So this is now 15 years later. He's saying that he feels like it hasn't really evolved since he left. And I kind of disagree with this, but I get where he's coming from. So he continues. Aside from the Griselda rapper Stove God Cooks and Future, he's asked if anyone around him feels exciting, and he says no. We've never given mediocre music. I hear so much music and it's just like an assembly line. And it works. They sell it. And people eat it up. But it's an art that I always find that's missing, and I feel like we always give that. We have always delivered that. Then they go on to touch on Kanye West a little bit, saying that while Malice took some time off, Pusha soldiered on solo at the same time that Kanye West's Good Music crew became ascendant, quickly becoming a key piece in that squad, all while sharpening his powers and aesthetics to produce some of the most finely crafted mainstream drug rap of the 2010s, while Malice explored religion, wrote books, and penned non-secular bars with a pointed addendum to his stage name, No Malice. That is until 2019, the turn of another decade and another change of heart. During sessions at his Wyoming ranch for what would become his Jesus is King album, Kanye asked Pusha T for Malice's number. Pusha T was in the early throes of a disillusionment with what it meant to be in Kanye's orbit. Living through the foolishness, as Pusha T describes it, even though their union would sustain for another 2 or 3 years, and they'll touch more on that later. Pusha T said, I don't want to bring Malice into this foolishness. Malice chimes in saying, Pusha T was like, you don't want to do this. Still, Malice gave his blessing and ended up coming out to Wyoming with his brother Pusha T and said, I don't deal with foolishness at all. But I saw what Pusha was talking about. So essentially, while they were working on that Jesus album with Kanye in Wyoming, Kanye wanted Malice's contribution to it, and Pusha T had started seeing early signs of Kanye kind of falling off the deep end. And while Pusha T was still there due to business obligations, due to, just creating art, with Kanye, he didn't want his brother, who had been absent from hip-hop for so long, to get roped into the foolishness. Obviously, Pusha T being a decade and a half deeper in the game, he was more accustomed to sorting through the industry politics. Again, this is 2019, where he had already gotten attacked at his 2018 Toronto show, blackballed by Drake, etc. And Kanye's going crazy here, so he's warning Malice not to come out. But as frustrating as the experience ultimately was, it served as a crucial spark for the Clips reunion. It yielded the first official new Clips track in the Kanye West song Use This Gospel, but the sessions were even more fruitful than fans had realized. The brothers had revealed that they wrote to the Follow God beat before Kanye snatched it back for his Jesus album. Ironically, being so productive made Pusha T more frustrated, since the stuff they were creating together was still stuck under Kanye's umbrella. Pusha T said, "I feel like we were suddenly convinced that a Clips reunion could happen, but there was so much going on with the whole Kanye circle. If we ever decided we were going to jump back into it, then we should be jumping into it. It wasn't progressing like that. So I think if anything, there was a stumble on just trying to make it happen and everyone not just being on the same schedule. That was bothersome to me." Pusha T goes on to discuss his time as a solo artist without his brother, saying, "I've been alone at this for a long time. During that whole time, what you miss the most is that level of camaraderie and underlying loyalty." And the interviewer continues, Pusha's solo tenure was one marked by high highs, at least one critically agreed upon classic album, and a whole lot of what he describes as quote-unquote industry games. So finally standing side by side with his older brother again has been, as he says, a breath of fresh air. And they go on to touch on the common criticism of Pusha T, which is that, he's always talking about Coca-Cola, right? He doesn't really open up, even though he is a phenomenal rapper. And Pusha attributes that to playing to his strengths, right? And understanding that criticism, trying to be more vulnerable within his music, but ultimately doing what works best. So they go on to say, Pusha has long acknowledged the common critical assessment that Malice's verses usually have a lot more emotional substance compared to Pusha's. Pusha says, "I really dabbled with that criticism in my solo career a lot, and eventually I gave up. I can only be who I am, and I used to try to be conscious of that, what people might be missing from what they got from the clips, and I tried to make twists and turns through my verses. But it only works one way for you, man. The purest version of you is you, and that's it. But listen, I heard those comments, I heard them, and every time I felt like, damn, they just missed my brother Malice." On a side note, I can't wait for this Clips album. Drop a comment if you're hyped for this album. Their mixtapes, their albums, every piece of work they've done has been phenomenal. Obviously, Pusha's solo work as well. But when they're together, again, they play to each other's strengths, and each of them come with their own unique subject matter, style, etc. So this is going to be a very exciting project. Now we get into the drama of this whole situation. So the interviewer continues saying, "Still, it wouldn't be a Clips album without some label woes nearly derailing the fun even after the product was cooked to purity. The duo's lore is, of course, marked by the label politics that delayed a quick follow-up to their first album, Lord Willing, forcing them to dominate the mixtape circuit with their seminal We Got It For Cheap series while crafting their second album, Hell Hath No Fury, with a chip on their shoulder. What happened with Let God Sort 'Em Out is less dramatic, but it's a situation with massive reverberations nonetheless. If you expected the album last summer, the brothers sympathize. So did they. Pusha says that they felt confident, proud, and assured of themselves when they presented the music to Def Jam. The label loved what they heard, except for Kendrick Lamar's guest verse on the thunderous Chains and Whips, the final version of the song that Pharrell teased at his first Louis Vuitton runway show, and the song that Pusha says was the first to come out of their sessions. Don't be fooled by Pusha's interviews appealing for one last guest verse and the Twitter jokes that he went to a GNX tour date to physically walk Kendrick into the nearest studio. Kendrick's verse homework had been turned in for a while now, because again, there was rumors after Pusha T said the Clips album was done, they were just waiting on one more verse. Then he appeared at the GNX show. People thought, okay, he's trying to get Kendrick in the studio to cook up that one final verse. But no, there's apparently another mystery guest verse that we're waiting on. It's most likely Jay-Z. But they continue here. After a summer of beef between their two biggest artists that resulted in a still ongoing lawsuit from Drake, Def Jam's parent company, UMG, blanched at the antagonistic optics of two of Drake's biggest enemies linking on wax. Pusha T calls their apprehension stupid, primarily because none of the bars in Kendrick's otherwise excellent verse could really be perceived as a shot or even subliminal. It does, however, contain the stellar line, "Therapy taught me how to open up. It also showed me I don't give a F." And this is amazing, right? Like, just on a little side note, early days in the beef, I was saying the best angle that Drake could take in this whole thing was the fact that in 2022, Kendrick releases Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, where he's really opening up about his flaws as a character. admitting that he needs to work on himself before he can work on saving the culture, saving hip-hop, and admitting that he wasn't the savior, right? And then he comes back 2 years later to diss the big three, to go on this violent energy with Like That, talking about his temperament being bipolar and him choosing violence. I said the best angle Drake could have taken was pointing out the flaws that Kendrick himself pointed out in the music of Mr. Morale and saying, obviously, you didn't learn much from therapy because you haven't really grown, right? You're still insecure about your spot within the big three, within this conversation. I thought that would have been the most creative angle Drake could have taken. He obviously tried to by misinterpreting Mr. Morale's lyrics in The Hard Part 6, but he didn't exactly take that angle, and really Kendrick sums it up perfectly in that one bar, right? There could be the duality of the fact that therapy taught him how to open up, but it also showed him he doesn't give a F. He's going to ride for the values that he believes are righteous. And that's the beauty of Kendrick Lamar's music, right? Is that we understand his entire thought process, his entire personality through the music he actually gives us. It's not through social media. It's not through lawsuits. It's directly through the music. He gives us answers that we're looking for within the bars. And as you can see, right, they were ready to turn this album in September, but the label they were on, Def Jam, had said, nah, we're not including this Kendrick Lamar verse because obviously he was just in a fight with Drake, and two of Drake's biggest ops, Pusha T and Kendrick, linking on this track where Kendrick is making veiled references to the beef. It's not a good look for UMG when Drake all summer has been making threats at UMG saying, you better take this Not Like Us song down or else I'm taking legal action, right? And so this is just the early days of showing us the repercussions that a lawsuit like this can have on censorship of lyrics. It's not like Kendrick was saying anything crazy in this verse, but just the optics of it alone were enough to make UMG feel like they weren't protecting their golden goose, Drake, enough. So they wanted the verse censored. And this is exactly what Kanye was talking about, right? Someone who stood very close to Pusha T when Pusha T was banned from those studio sessions when Drake was around, when he was banned from Canada, when his songs were taken down due to copyright strikes from UMG, right? Kanye West has said this whole time that Lucien Grange, the CEO of UMG, was Drake's rich baby daddy, the guy who Drake can call to cry whenever he feels like another rapper is coming for his throne or tarnishing his reputation. And that worked for a long time. But of course, with Not Like Us, that song was bigger than Drake. That song broke all these records, right? So UMG would have been stupid to not put money behind it and promote it. And that's exactly what they did. Because of course they're about the money, right? And that's why Drake said, oh wait, I can't play this card anymore where I come to UMG and I tell them, hey, censor this, block that. Okay, if I can't do that, then I'm going to go to court and get this thing thrown out and end it all. To the point where now Pusha T is being threatened by his label to censor the music or else he can't release it. So they continue. Pusha T can barely contain his disgust recounting how the stalemate with Def Jam played out. They wanted me to ask Kendrick to censor his verse, which of course I was never doing. And then they wanted me to take the record off the album. And so after a month of not doing it, the lawyer at Def Jam, Steve Gawley, was like, well, we'll just drop the clips from our label then. But that can't work because I'm still there, solo, Pusha T. But if you let us all go, then maybe it could work. And sure enough, Def Jam eventually agreed to release the clips and drop Pusha T as a solo artist, freeing the duo to shop for a new home with a finished clips album and plenty more music in their pockets. Ultimately, Pusha says the endeavor was gratifying. It felt good to even see how other labels were buying for the project. Now, as they teased last week with a picture in front of the label's plain insignia, they've ended up at Jay-Z's Rock Nation label, where they feel fully supported and energized. I think that synergy, just in a rap sense, is going to speak volumes, Pusha says of the partnership. And we get more details in a separate interview from Pusha T's manager, Steven Victor, about how that label reconstruction went and how they went from being dropped from Def Jam over this request to censor Kendrick lyrics to then moving the project onto Jay-Z's label, Rock Nation. But before we touch on that, we got to look at a couple other things that Pusha T and his brother had said within this interview. They continue asking Pusha about Drake, saying that one foe who definitely isn't getting any more of Pusha T's time in the press is Drake. The Six God famously bowed out of their 2018 Memorial Day weekend bout just as it was getting good, when Pusha forever altered the perception of diss tracks by backing his up with forensic evidence like a legal investigator. Drake infamously let things fizzle out before dropping an album with lines like, never a matter of could I or should I, as luck would have it, I'm settling into my role as the good guy. But before the events of last spring with Drake and Kendrick Lamar, Drake had spent a lot of time on wax practically begging Pusha T to get back in the ring, particularly in 2023 when he made a music video wearing all of the classic Pharrell jewelry pieces that Pharrell auctioned off in intentionally swagless fashion. He bragged on Travis Scott's Meltdown, saying that he would destroy those grails without a care, and claimed that he could post up in Virginia anytime on his own on his For All the Dogs album, where he also taunted a rapper going broke amidst a refrain of empty clips. In the years since they battled, Drake has done everything to complicate the good guy image he once gamely upheld. For All the Dogs even samples the Scarface bad guy clip. Pusha T heard the taunts, and much like when I asked him a similar question 3 years ago, he could not care less. I think after everything that had been done, I don't think there was ever anything subliminal to be said ever again in life. Not only just musically, like, bro, I was actually in Canada. I actually had a show and made it home. So I can't pay attention to none of that. I did the dance for real, not to come back and tiptoe around anything. And then they ask him, so would you ever engage again if he went full tilt? Pusha T says, man, I would only engage if I felt like it. So for the record, bait jobs like buying and wearing Neptune's pieces from that same era that the clips had thrived in aren't going to do the trick to get Pusha back in the booth. He's always said he was a fan, Pusha said. So I feel like that's something a fan would do. It wasn't like Pharrell was hurting for money and sold his jewelry. Drake bought those chains at an auction. Then the interviewer continues, still, however assured Pusha feels in his own battles with Drake, I've wondered if it feels bittersweet for him in any way that Kendrick got the full back and forth knockout experience, whereas Pusha's battle in a way was cut short by label interference with J. Prince weighing in and Drake ultimately backing away. And Pusha says, nah, I feel like everything happened the way it was supposed to happen. I had my own vision and my own intent in everything that I did during that time. And I did everything I wanted to. There was nothing that I felt slighted about in watching anything from the battle with Kendrick last year. It was good to watch. I knew where it was going. I knew how it was going to play out. And it did. Earlier, when discussing Def Jam clutching their pearls over a Clips and Kendrick record, Pusha said that it reminded him too much of 2018. Weighing in on Drake and Kendrick's ongoing feud, namely Drake's decision to sue UMG over releasing Not Like Us, Pusha elaborates on what he meant. Pusha says, I will say this. If Drake's adamant to have a lawsuit, it's only because he knows all the things that they did to suppress all the things that were happening around the time of the story of Adin, and the verses and the records and things that were happening back then. He alludes to instances in which, he says, labels muddled, if not outright nixed, the release of verses in which Pusha T talked his crap next to people closely affiliated with Drake, as Pusha T did on Rick Ross and Lil Wayne's Maybach Music 6, and a posthumously released Pop Smoke song with Young Thug. We're going to touch on those issues shortly, but Pusha T continues saying, I don't rate him no more. Pusha says of Drake's off-wax antics, the suing thing is bigger than some rap stuff. I just don't rate you. Damn, it's like it just kind of cheapens the art of it once we have real questions about suing and litigation. Like, what? For this? Pusha once rapped that he's often quote-unquote at the mercy of a game where the codes are missing. As our conversation turned towards beef, disagreements, and conflicts, he seems to want to go out of his way to reject the idea of him being a bully. The way he sees it, every heat check or headshot he's doled out has been the product of him finishing energy that others started. I've really been in Paris making my joints, doing my stuff. When these people mention me, they're really going out of their way. What have I done besides wear clothes these past couple of years? I just been with Louis Vuitton. This stuff ain't coming out of nowhere. Bro, I'd be cool with all these guys. Everybody you mentioned today, bro, I promise you, they did the underhanded weird stuff. So we already reviewed a lot of the underhanded weird stuff that Pusha T's referencing, right? Things that he spoke on himself. Drake doing his best to try to blackball Pusha T from concerts, from studio sessions, trying to censor his verses with Kendrick, or at least UMG doing so because they're scared of legal action Drake might take. But at the same time, Drake is on Travis Scott records talking about melting down Pharrell's chains and them being lucky that he wasn't at those Paris fashion shows because he would have been with the Wassas. A bunch of threats on Drake's end and a bunch of blackballing behind the scenes. But it's interesting when he mentions these two songs, Maybach Music 6 with Rick Ross and Lil Wayne, and Paranoid with Pop Smoke, Young Thug, and Gunna. Now, let's dive into the backstory of these records and why Pusha T was left off these songs, or at least their final versions. And again, he attributes it to the fact that the labels had nixed his verses on those two songs, aka they told him, nah, we're not releasing these records when you're on here, especially rapping right next to Drake's mentor, Lil Wayne, who you previously had beef with, or Drake's affiliates like Young Thug, on a verse where you're taking shots at Drake. So Maybach Music 6 was actually Rick Ross's attempt at ending the long-standing beef between Cash Money and Pusha T, right? He wanted to get Lil Wayne and Pusha T to reunite on this song, and this was on his album Port of Miami 2, where he also had a feature from Drake on the song Gold Roses. So both Lil Wayne and Pusha T individually sent Rick Ross their verses. They both cleared them, aka Lil Wayne and Pusha T were fine being on the song together, but when the song came out, only Lil Wayne was on it. Pusha T's verse was left off. But we did actually hear Pusha T's verse, and he's definitely taking some shots at Drake here. So he raps, "What a hell of a year, true colors exposed. Crowns on these clowns, it's like you colored they nose." This is a year after the story of Adin was released, and of course the cover art to that song was Drake in blackface with clown makeup on as well. So here, of course, he's saying that the true colors of Drake had been exposed. Of course, there's a picture of Drake in blackface. That's the cover of the story of Adin, which is exposing Drake, and he's painted like a clown. The crowns on these clowns. Pusha continues, "We're still talking skill set or popularity polls. When you speak truth to power, your popularity grows. Peers switch gears out of relevance of fear, when their name's not as hot as who they want to stand near. All you guys are weird. How can you compare? When you say you've been rich, but we all need that stuff like veneers." So it sounds like on this record, he's already speaking to people switching up on him and the industry kind of painting him out to be the villain and blackballing him in order to stand next to who was popular at the time, right? And he continues, "Young guy, old guy, you all the same to me. Just one slick tweet from trending dangerously." Here he's referencing Jay Prince, Drake's OG, who had stepped into the beef to end it. And he's saying, "An old guy or a young guy, it's all the same to me. You're one tweet away from trending dangerously, aka I will come back in full attack if I see you taking subs of me." And this is again in 2019. So he was pretty heavy on the subs for a couple years on all these unreleased verses, right? The ones that got scrapped from the label. And eventually, when he was asked in interviews, like when Drake took shots at him on the 2022 song Churchill Downs, Pusha T was saying, "I'm tired of these recycled old flows. I'm not stepping back into the ring here. I'm not doing the subliminals." And he said that on the GQ magazine as well, right? That he's done with subliminal shots. But you could see here that he was very open to taking subliminal shots, even on a record with Drake's mentor, Lil Wayne, right? But of course, these verses kept getting nixed. And we saw things happening behind the scenes. Pusha T literally saying he got banned from Canada. And it got to the point where now Pusha T is done with referencing this beef and done with even taking subliminals or hopping back in the ring, because he's seen what could go down when you start taking shots at the courthouse Karen. So Rick Ross was asked at the time in 2019, after hyping up that this would be a reunion between Lil Wayne and Pusha T, why was Pusha T left off the final version on the album? And Rick Ross had said that he originally wanted to bring Lil Wayne and Pusha T together more organically. He had concluded by saying that everything was on a positive note and he hasn't lost hope of the reconciliation between Pusha T and Lil Wayne, essentially stating that the timing didn't feel right. And he said, "What's so dope about it, both verses were cleared by both artists. It was more about the bigger picture. Is this going to move both of them getting together? I'll take the charge for that. I didn't feel like it was the time for that."
When the album came out,
Right.
It's just Wayne. The Pusha verse is not on it. Can you give us the scoop on what happened? Because Pusha's people tweeted and said that they had cleared the verse.
What's so dope about it is both verses were cleared from both parties.
Okay.
But like I said, it was more about the bigger picture. Is this going to move them two getting together? I'm going to take the charge for that. I didn't feel like this was the time for that. I got Wayne verse first, then I got Push verse. I wanted to bring them together either way, or at least spark that conversation.
And you could see here, this is a very politically correct type of answer to give, right? Emphasizing that both sides had been fine with being on the song together, but when it came down to it, the timing didn't feel right. And think about the timing, right? This is a year after the Pusha T and Drake beef. Drake is on this Rick Ross project, and it's being released by UMG under Def Jam. So you got to think, what Pusha T's alluding to in this 2025 GQ interview is that it was Drake behind the scenes and his rich baby daddy Lucien who decided this wasn't the right time or the right moment for Pusha T to be sneak dissing Drake, especially on a song with Drake's mentor Lil Wayne on an album that Drake himself was featured on. We would even see a similar thing happen years later when Rick Ross called Drake out for putting a cease and desist on a French Montana record that Drake had a verse on because Drake didn't like the subject matter within the song. He essentially had his label send a cease and desist for French Montana to not release his verse. So that's already suspicious. And then we get into the Pop Smoke record, right? So after Pop Smoke passed away, there was a posthumous album that was released, and it was being handled by Pusha T's manager, Steve Victor. It was being released through him. Pusha T had a verse on a song called Paranoid with Young Thug and Gunna. On that verse, he's taking more subliminals at Drake, and this is the second verse to get nixed on the final album. He couldn't release it on the final project. So this was actually a great verse, and Pusha T kind of flips the whole concept where all the other artists on the track are talking about them themselves being paranoid. Pusha T in his verse is emphasizing that he inflicts paranoia onto his opponents. And of course, he's referencing Drake. So he starts rapping off, "You know reality bites, it's chess, not checkers. Those empty threats only sound good on your records. If the patois is not followed by a blocka, it's like marked for death Screwface without the choppa." Just like Kendrick rapping, "There's no accents you could sell me," here Pusha T is saying the threats only sound good on your records, and when you're talking all that, Jamaican patois in that accent, it's not real unless it's actually being followed up by shots, aka blocka, right? If not, you're just being a studio gangster. And he compares it to the film Marked for Death, and in the film, a DEA agent goes to war with a gang of Jamaican drug dealers, and the gang's leader is named Screwface. Pusha T is saying all that patois in your songs, all those, that fake tough talk, those accents, it's like Screwface without the choppa, without the actual weapon. Let him rush the stage when you made like Sinatra. So here he's referencing the fact that people rushed the stage during his 2018 Toronto performance and tried to attack him. And in the end, the person who tried to attack Pusha T was actually hit with a knife. And that's why Pusha T talks about a blade being with him on his flight out of Toronto to New York after that show, when he raps, only to hide the blade flying back through LaGuardia. I might even buy a home out in Mississauga. Mississauga is a city in the greater Toronto area, and it's actually where Party Next Door grew up. His album with Drake, some sexy sleepy love songs where they're taking a picture outside two buildings, that is in Mississauga. Pusha T is showing here that he's not scared to be in Canada. He'll even buy a home out in the town right next to where Drake grew up at, showing he's not scared of all these threats from Drake. And he continues, "On my wall have scrawls of chabalas, many dolls that are sprawled, they're my ill nanas. Make a call, she gon' crawl, bad gal Patra." Obviously, this is also in reference to bad gal Riri, right? Rihanna, since Drake is the Rihanna rejected Romeo. And he ends the verse off saying, "I'm involved and absolved, I am Godfather. Hush." So obviously this entire verse is Pusha referencing the incident in Toronto with Drake, right? Calling Drake fake. Also, I highly suggest you guys check this verse out. This is a phenomenal verse when you actually hear it without me just reading the lyrics. But what happened was the album comes out and the song, even though it was included on the track list, didn't actually make the final version. And a couple days later, Young Thug gets on Instagram and says, "I don't respect the Pusha T verse on the song with me and Gunna, cause I don't have nothing to do with y'all beef, nor does Gunna. And if I knew that was about him, I would have made changes on our behalf. This rapper stuff is so gay."
First of all, your verse 7 days, if you know what I mean. I'm up for a week. Second of all, you already went crazy the first time, so you ain't even got it. Ain't nothing but a sucker going on double takes and triple takes and quadruple takes. You should have just got all of it out on the first song. You put the first song out. You ain't even had to do all that on those other niggas. You just feel like you ain't gonna get enough views on your own so you came and put some bullshit on a whole nother niggas resting in peace music. Cause you feel like, but this is the perfect platform. Thug, Gunna, and Pop Smoke. This is the perfect platform to go at this. This is the perfect song to do it on. Why the f*** you ain't do that on your own song? Do that shit on your own song, nigga. This ain't jumping in on the business because I don't give a f*** about it. Now one of y'all got going on, we kill for real.
Pusha T clapped back saying, "Hey, Young Thug, a couple things. One, don't feel bad. Nobody knew what the verse was about. The label heads that stopped it didn't even know. They only assumed because he told them, the same way he told them about the Ross Maybach 6 verse. And if he'll tell record executives about rap verses, God only knows what else he'll tell. I don't deal in police work, police rappers, or police guys." And this is pretty, prophetic from Pusha T, right? Like, if Drake was willing to go to record executives over verses like that Maybach 6 verse with Rick Ross or this Pop Smoke verse, Lord knows what else he would do, right? And we'd see years later, he would end up going to sue over rap lyrics that he did not like and wanted taken down, aka Not Like Us. So Pusha T did the mature thing and actually tagged his manager and the one who was managing the Pop Smoke project and said, "Steven Victor, I demand you take me off the deluxe Pop Smoke album to avoid any confusion that may take away from this amazing body of work." So as you can see, right, the song wasn't on the album originally for a reason. Drake had made a couple calls and got that verse quickly deleted. And then once it was reposted on the album, Thug and Pusha T got into a little spat, and Pusha T said, "You know what? Let me remove myself from the situation. I demand to be taken off of this song. I don't want it to distract from Pop Smoke's moment." So as you can see, Pusha T has been going through a ton of weird things behind the scenes whenever he somewhat references Drake, right? But it's okay for Drake to go on the Travis Scott song and throw a bunch of subliminals at Pusha T, at Pharrell, taunt him about melting their jewelry and them being lucky that he wasn't at the fashion show that they were at, and of course naming a song off his For All the Dogs album, Virginia Beach, and taunting that he could go and post up and chill in Virginia whenever he wants. That's fine, but when Pusha T talks about buying a home in Mississauga, then Drake makes the label call to get that song removed. And of course, you gotta remember, throughout this whole timeline, like that Pop Smoke album came out in 2020, all this happened between 2018 and 2020, and the whole time Kanye is kind of playing both sides, right? And Pusha T is talking about how in 2019 he was working on the Jesus album with Kanye, and he was kind of skeptical of having his brother join in because there was a lot of weird stuff going on. He was getting weird vibes from the Kanye situation. So he actually spoke on Kanye even more in this GQ interview, and it kind of connects the dots on how Pusha T was feeling in terms of the entire industry just being very weird. So we're going to touch on that. We're also going to look at his manager, Steven Victor, who had given us more detail on how Pusha T actually got out of his Def Jam deal, which again all stemmed from the fact that they wanted to censor the Kendrick Lamar verse because it was a bad look for Drake that Pusha T and Kendrick were on the same song together. So first they touch on Kanye, right? They say Pusha's falling out with Kanye. While they've quite clearly gone their separate ways at this point, Pusha says things were headed there, and the last few months or years of his time with Kanye were him, quote-unquote, playing the industry game more than anything. Pusha said, "I realized at certain points that I was really alone in everything that was going on as far as rap drama, so on and so forth." He points to the 2021 Donda sessions in Atlanta as one of those points. "I'm in a collective of a lot of individuals. Everybody's working. But I really got stuff to do. And I leave, and it's one energy, and then when I come back, the energy's off. And then you hear about the sidebar conversations. You got your homeboy who coming up to you like, yo, they were saying this when you left. I'm thinking that we're all in this collectively getting busy, but in actuality, everybody has their own agendas, and I feel like I was the only one who didn't. My agenda was for the squad. So from that point on, I just looked at everybody differently, and I looked at it as, we're just going to make music, we're just going to get beats, we're going to go write some raps, and we're going to keep everything moving." And this sounds very similar to the 2018 Wyoming sessions, right? Where Kanye wouldn't have Pusha T in the same room as Drake. Drake would come in for one day, Pusha T would come in for another. Then Kanye West is taunting Drake with the Lift Yourself beat. Then Pusha T is getting this info about Drake's kid. All the while, they're not allowed in the same room together, and it's all being orchestrated by these weird industry games that Kanye West is initiating, right? Pusha T says the same thing happened with the 2021 Donda sessions. He would leave and come back and hear that people were talking crap about him. Now, people looked at this kind of funny, saying like, oh, Pusha T was being fake with Kanye, right? Like, if he had problems with Kanye, he shouldn't have even been working on music. But you have to realize, Pusha T and Kanye had been working together at that point for 11 years. Pusha T has ghostwritten, forget just features, has ghostwritten tons of work for Kanye West. On Donda alone, he wrote the best song, Off the Grid. So from Pusha T's perspective, this is just business, right? And he's willing to forget whatever personal BS is going on with Kanye and overcome that for the greater good of simply creating music, focusing on the overall mission of the Good Music Collective and how far they've already come. This is a sign of maturity from Pusha T. This isn't Pusha T being fake. This is Pusha T putting his ego aside for the sake of better music. And they continue. At press time, Kanye has burnt virtually every bridge and collective relationship he's ever had, and Pusha T is no exception. Pusha T says, "It's like, bro, you've been mentioning me, screaming about me. You got every soul believing that I've done such a great injustice to you." And that's a lie. He goes on his rants The one thing I can say about Kanye is he knows that every issue that he's having and crying about online right now, I've told him distinctly about those things. Distinctly. So when he gets up there with his KKK mask and he's screaming behind it like a pro wrestler, he has to scream behind a mask. He doesn't talk to me like he talks to the others. It's usually invigorating to hear Pusha T talk his crap, but there's something sad about seeing such a prolific partnership end like this. Pusha T says, "We made some great stuff, bro. We did. But let me tell you something. Kanye is a genius, and his intuition is even more genius level, right? But that's why me and him don't get along, because he sees through my fakeness with him. He knows I don't think he's a man. He knows it, and that's why we can't build with each other no more. That's why me and him don't click, because he knows what I really, really think of him. He showed me the weakest sides of him, and he knows how I think of weak people." So again, throughout all these years, right, Kanye West doing Pusha T wrong, he's still willing to put his ego aside for the greater good of creating music, but he admits that Kanye sees through that fakeness, right? Sees through the fact that Pusha T is just there on business. And, after years of warning Kanye to not go down these rabbit holes, Pusha T at this point has kind of lost respect for him. And Kanye sees that, and that's why they can't build together anymore. But they do continue giving Kanye props for one particular thing, saying, more important to Pusha than the music he made with Kanye is how Kanye handled the financial fruits of that relationship. 5 years ago, after publicly expressing frustration with the predatory nature of label deals in general and the splits of his Def Jam contract in particular, Kanye announced that he planned to give 50% ownership stake in the masters of his own good music roster back to the artists themselves. Today, Pusha says that Kanye kept his word. The greatest thing he did, and why I'm okay with where me and him are at right now, and I'm cool with staying that way, is because at the end of the day, my truth is my truth. But I still respect what he did in the business. And he speaks ill about the music we've made and giving me certain records, but the one thing he did give me was all the profits back from the Def Jam deal. So yeah, Kanye had been complaining, when he was going on his anti-Semitic rants, that his contracts were bad, his good music contracts were bad, and he promised to give the masters back to all of his good music artists. And Pusha T says that he actually did do that, and that's why he's okay with Kanye badmouthing him, because he did do right on his promises financially. And they continue saying, when it comes to Kanye, there's always the question of how much his erratic behavior can be attributed to the mental health issues that he's openly discussed. To what degree can you truly hold his rants and screeds against him? Pusha T answers, he's sick, I do believe that much. You're sick, but you're also very calculated. And if I take your sickness and how calculated you've been and how disruptive you've been and tried to be to me, then it cancels itself out. I can't look at it as sick because you're detrimental. You're detrimental to everything. So yeah, all in all, Pusha T is very aware of a lot of the industry BS that's been going on behind the scenes, right? Whether it's Kanye or Drake, Pusha T has been through a lot of crap talking, a lot of bad mouthing, a lot of nixing from the record labels, a lot of Drake playing puppeteer behind the scenes to try and suppress everything Pusha T's got going on ever since their beef back in 2018. So Steven Victor, Pusha T's manager, did an interview with Billboard to elaborate further on the potential censorship of this new Kendrick verse on the Clips album and how it led to Pusha T jumping through hoops and paying a crazy amount of money to actually get out of his deal in order to make sure that song wasn't censored. So Billboard asked Steven, when you started to hear objections to the Kendrick verse on the Clips album, where were they coming from? Steven said, UMG has this department where they review lyrics, so it was that department. The real reason that department is there is to protect the artist and the label from lawsuits for copyright infringement. They do it for all labels. Some labels adhere to it closer than others. Let's say you interpolate someone else's song. That department is there to make sure that the song is properly cleared. It's not meant to be like, you said XYZ about XYZ artists, so we're not going to release this music. AKA, these departments that review lyrics are mainly there to avoid any copyright issues. They're not there to make sure that other artists don't get their feelings hurt over lyrics, right? And he's saying that it was that department of UMG that ended up trying to censor this Kendrick verse. So they continue asking him, while you've been working with Pusha T, have you ever had challenges in that department before? And Steven says, in the beginning, no, but starting in 2018, yeah. That's the year that Pusha released the story of Adin. He put it on SoundCloud and it's never been officially released on streaming services. Was that a way of getting around any internal obligations? Part of the reason, yeah, to avoid that. Also, we never actually properly cleared the song. Pusha T mentioned 2 songs in his interview with GQ, Rick Ross's Maybach Music 6 and Pop Smoke's Paranoia, where his verses were ultimately cut. Was that because of the same department's scrutiny? Yes. What happened on the Pop Smoke song is that UMG thought he was dissing Drake on that song. He wasn't, but they thought he was. Pop Smoke released on my label, and obviously I managed Pusha T. So they came to me and said, we're not going to put this out now unless you get Pusha T to change his lyrics. Even though it has nothing to do with Pop Smoke, they're like, either Pusha changes the lyrics or we're not putting the album out. What happened to freedom of speech? First of all, he's not dissing Drake. But how do you get to tell them to change his lyrics or you're not putting the album out? So yeah, again, Steven here is clearly stating he was the one managing this Pop Smoke album, and UMG came to him and said, we're not releasing this project if Pusha T is on here with this verse because he's dissing Drake. And again, remember, Pusha T after this said he's been banned from Canada and is no longer interested in engaging in a subliminal war with Drake because of all the behind the scenes industry BS that's been going on. And at the same time, Drake has still been sneak dissing Pusha T on a bunch of different records. So they continue. From what Pusha T told GQ, this Kendrick verse that they're concerned about on the new record is not dissing Drake either. And Steven says, yeah, I don't know what their concern is, but they were like, there's a line here. We think it's controversial. Kendrick needs to change it, or we're not putting it out. We're not going to ask Kendrick to change the verse. You guys are wrong. Stop looking at it this way. None of this makes any sense. And again, this is all after Drake threatened legal action against UMG over Not Like Us. So they're paranoid now, no pun intended, since that's the name of the Pop Smoke song. They're paranoid that Drake is going to threaten legal action, especially if they see that Pusha T and Kendrick are linking up to reflect on the beef or even to just make a record in general because the optics look bad. So they continue. It got to a point where the conversation became, you can't keep stopping this guy from being able to put out his art. Pusha T's a rapper. Every time he puts out an album or a song, you can't listen to it to make sure he's not dissing somebody before you put it out. He has to think about what he's saying before he's saying it in the hopes that you might not think that what he's saying is the wrong thing. Who could live their life like that? So yeah, it literally got to the point where Pusha T has to make sure he's avoiding anything in his lyrics that could be interpreted as a Drake diss because Drake will get the record label to nix it. Is that not messed up? They continue. I went to them and said, let's put out the song somewhere else since you guys have an issue with it. You guys won't have to stand behind whatever complications come from it. We'll put the song out somewhere else and we'll license it back to you guys when the album comes out. UMG's response was, how about you just find somewhere else to put the whole Clips album out? Just pay us something and put it out somewhere else. My thing was, we can't do that. Pusha T and the Clips are one thing. At this point, he clearly doesn't trust you guys at UMG. You guys haven't been good stewards of his career. So they said, find another deal and let's figure out a business. They didn't drop us. They were like, pay us this money, which was an exorbitant amount of money, a crap ton of money, and we'll let you out this deal. And that's what happened. We paid them the money, an insane amount of money. It wasn't like $200,000. It was a lot of money for an artist to come up with. They bought themselves out of their UMG deal. And then they asked, so how many solo albums did Pusha have left on his deal with Def Jam? And Steven says, I don't really want to talk about that part. He had like 3 albums left. So you had to pay 7 figures to get out of that deal with UMG? And Steven says, yeah. So essentially, again, they were threatening to not release the entire Clips album over this Kendrick verse because it was bad optics for Pusha and Kendrick to be on the same song together, to the point where to get the album out, they literally had to buy themselves out of their Def Jam deal and pay Universal 7 figures to get out of the deal. And then they ask, how quickly were you able to get another deal in place? It happened simultaneously with getting out of the previous deal. It took a couple of weeks for us to figure out the paperwork. Again, it was a lot of money. We kept going back and forth saying, can we pay you this amount of money and a part of the profit of the music? Can we figure out a deal where we pay you guys as the money we make from the new release instead of coming up with this large sum of money right now? And they said no. They were like, we want our money and we want some of the profits of the music. Once I knew that we had, in principle, a deal in place with Def Jam to leave, I got on the phone with Jay-Z. I was like, look, this is what's happening. We've been talking about doing XYZ together. There's an opportunity here to do this album. What do you think? Jay-Z hit me back right away and was like, you just made my day. Let's figure it out. What do we need to get it done? I went back to Pusha and I said, listen, Jay's going to give us a very artist-friendly deal. We get to own the masters and they'll put the marketing power of Rock Nation behind it. You guys are friends. It's a great outcome. We worked out the deal in less than 24 hours. And then he's asked, you had to pay Def Jam a lump sum to get out of the deal and also give them a cut of what you make off the new album? Yeah, we had to give them a cut also, which is insane. But the good thing about it is that Pusha is in control of his future. Now he has 3 deals in 3 different places. At the beginning of his solo career, we put out records independently with mass appeal. He owns those records. Then we did the deal with Good Music. When Kanye left Def Jam, we worked out an agreement where he gave Pusha T his masters back on the Good Music side. And now we did this deal with Jay-Z. Pusha T is having way more success creatively, financially, and professionally than he did at the peak of his career, which was when Clip's Grinding came out. Smart and Steady wins the race. So yeah, this is great to hear, right? Pusha T initially, before he signed to Good Music, and when he was done with the Clips, he was dropping music independently on mass appeal so that he was getting all the profits of that music. Then when Kanye's contract with Def Jam ended, he gave Pusha T all the masters back to the Good Music stuff, and that's huge records, right? Like New Godflow, Mercy, I Don't Like with Chief Keef, Runaway, etc. So now Pusha T has all the masters back for that. And now, even though this deal with UMG and Def Jam was not going great, right? They kept suppressing Pusha T's music, trying to censor him. He got out of that deal. He now has a deal with Jay-Z's Rock Nation, where he owns the masters to all the new music that he ends up releasing. So he's in a great position, right? What appeals to you about taking the independent route? They asked Steven. He says, I think there's still a place for major record labels, but if you can get away with being at a place that understands the culture and you can get the same resources that you would from a major, then why would you go to a major, especially with the way that deals are structured? You can get everything and more from somebody that not only looks like you, but behaves like you, has the same mindset as you. You're not dealing with layers and layers of corporate bureaucracy and nonsense. And all artists are not treated equally in the major record label system. Then he's asked, obviously Pusha T and Def Jam had a long relationship. Is it tough to see it end this way? And he answers, Pusha T has been signed to Def Jam for almost 15 years. We've been there for a long time. We've seen different regimes come and go. But at the end of the day, if a relationship is not working for whatever reason, it doesn't make any sense to stay there, regardless of how much you might like it or might feel comfortable. And I don't know if the amount of attention, focus, and detail that we were looking for this album rollout would have been there anyway. And obviously, this is a great way to kind of conclude this story, right? Until we get this new Clips album. Pusha T, who had been involved in a bunch of industry BS, whether it was from Kanye or from UMG trying to censor him to not make Drake look bad, he's now independent, releasing music through Rock Nation, but owning all the masters to his new tracks. And after dealing with a whole lot of BS over literally just winning a rap battle,
I study rap battles for a living.
Pusha T is now in the position where he can record freely, not worry about his music being censored, and owning the rights to all his music, being in a much better deal financially. And yes, it might have been costly. He had to chalk up $1 million to get out of that deal. In the long term, it'll pay for itself as he has escaped the shackles of the major record label system. He no longer has to worry about censorship from Drake's rich baby daddy Lucian Grange, and he can now be free to record the music that he wants on his own time with his own financial incentive. All in all, this is an absolutely crazy story, which again just derives from the fact that Birdman did not pay Pharrell. But ironically, it all comes full circle because now Pusha T is getting directly paid independently for all of his music. So let me know what you guys think, and I will catch you in the next one.
I study rap battles for a living.